We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrifice?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are Sex People! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hello, listeners. I'm sorry to say that this is a Parth-only intro. Trent is off PAing on, I think, a true crime show about a fictionalized retelling of an officer's encounter with a killer, something like that. I don't know. I think I PA'd on this show as well, and it was an interesting experience. All that to say, you're stuck with just me for this intro, so I guess I'll just cut to the chase and let you guys know what I ate most recently. Last night, my mother so lovingly made egg curry for me and my familia, and it was really, really good, and there was some egg curry left, but it made me have like heartburn or something. It was really heavy, and my mom was like, you can have it for lunch today, and my parents went out for lunch without me because I had a job interview, and so I was left to my own devices with my parents believing I would have this leftover egg curry, but I didn't really want it, so what did I do? I had some P.F. Chang's ready-made, it's frozen, you put it on a skillet and then eat it, and they were dan noodles, and they were pretty good, and I ate half, and I'm keeping half for tomorrow because I need something easy to eat tomorrow because I'm going on a shoot with friend of the show, Adam Volerich. So now that you know what I ate, how about I just cue this intro? Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week, we are talking with Oscar-nominated production designer Suzie Davies about her work on Conclave, a movie Trent and I both really enjoyed. And if you're listening to this the day this airs, you're listening to this on the day of the Oscars. So we, as of yet, and as of this recording, do not know whether or not Suzie Davies took home the big one. But if you listen, I guess, any other day than today, then you will know. But she is nominated for her work on this movie, and it's really awesome. I'm really glad we got to talk with her. She gets into how she got into production design, how she met Edward Berger, and I kind of don't want to stop you guys from listening to this, so why don't I just cue the interview? Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Suzie Davies. She's the production designer behind such films as Hard Truths, Saltburn, and her Oscar-nominated work on Edward Berger's Conclave. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolute pleasure.
First of all, can you just start by talking about when you first knew you wanted to become a production designer?
Excellent. I didn't know that I wanted to become a production designer. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually went to agricultural college and learnt about farming in my youth. You know, like some people don't know what they want to do until they're in their 20s, and that happened to me. And after agricultural college, I sort of, went home. I thought, well, I don't really want to be a farmer, but I don't know what I want to be. And so I started working for a model maker and sculptor who lived near where my mum and dad lived, because I was living rent-free at their house whilst trying to find a grown-up job. And no one ever tells you about this industry at the school I went to anyway. So basically ended up sweeping his floor and making cups of tea and just watching how he worked. And it was just like someone opening a door to a world I knew nothing about. And it just started to feel really comfortable, like something really sparked my interest. And he treated me like an apprentice. And I started working for lots of other sculptors and model makers. And it was a great learning curve because I would get to go to these mythical places like Pinewood and Shepperton and rock up on a pre-light day for some crazy commercial. We'd install our 50-foot dragon or our, bunch of trees. Like we built loads of stuff out of polystyrene, basically, and sculpted things and models out of polystyrene. So we'd install our elements on a pre-light day, and I'd watch everyone come together, the shooting crew, to create the worlds. And I just found it absolutely fascinating. And it just lit a little fire in me. And I started working for lots of other designers and art directors and assisting them. And then I was a standby art director, which is a role where you're on camera with the shooting crew, helping compose the frames and working closely with the prop team. And then, so now I'm the designer booking in a model maker to build a 50-foot dragon or something such like. So that was my route, basically. So learnt on the job, I guess.
Sort of a non sequitur, but before we get into the movie, has your farming background ever crossed over into helping out?
Yeah, it just has. The movie I just finished this summer is a movie called, and I don't know if this is what it will be called eventually because it's in an edit now. It's called 3 Bags Full of Sheep Detective Movie. Yeah, it's based on a book about a bunch of sheep who work out a murder in the village. And my agriculture knowledge was quite useful because we had to grow, like 20 acres of grass and build a little farm in Oxfordshire in the UK. So it was quite fun revisiting and trying to remember all my knowledge.
Can you talk about how you were first approached to work on Conclave?
Conclave was an interesting one because the script was amazing and it was really descriptive, and that's obviously very helpful for a designer to have those sort of visual descriptions. But also, on talking to Edward, he was very clear, and he is very clear. He's very adept at expressing his desires and needs and wants for the film. So it was very clear we wanted to bring this sort of papal drama into a very contemporary environment. I think we often think of that we should see cardinals or priests only in churches and ornate cloisters, but we wanted to bring this contemporary part of Rome to life as well, and to see these characters in a more everyday setting, doing everyday things. Sort of, the weight of the world is on them to make this decision, and they're often held in high regard, and they look like they should be, especially in those amazing costumes. But the flip side of that, the sides we don't see when they're having a coffee, on their phones or whatever, was just as interesting. And the whole film is about a juxtaposition of every opposite all the way through, light and dark, male and female, ancient and modern. And so it was that really piqued my interest because it gave us an opportunity to create a world of the unknown. There's a certain amount of work that we do in the research of a Conclave, and obviously the book and the screenplay have been very cleverly and clearly researched, and we did our research of what we know about a Conclave, and it was then the fun bit in a way, because we did that and we honoured that, but the bit we don't know behind the scenes, where do the cardinals go after they've done their voting in the Sistine Chapel? Well, what does that look like? What do they eat? What do they drink? All those things. And that was the interesting concept for me, to try and bring that part to life as much as the other part. So building our jigsaw of the Vatican, because we couldn't film in the real Vatican. So it's a jigsaw of known locations within Rome and Naples, and then also a couple of big set builds at Cinecittà. And just going to Cinecittà Studios in Rome was an absolute dream. It was really exciting to drive through the gates every day and feel Fellini's experience get into your veins almost. It was great.
We heard that all the architecture and everything is, like you said, a patchwork of all these different locations. Was Cinecittà your home base? How did the schedule work out for you guys?
Yeah, so we had offices at Cinecittà. We had a great local crew. It was quite an international production because we obviously had Ed is a German director, a French DOP, myself from the UK, German costume designer, Italian makeup. So it was a really nice mashup of European ideas and thoughts. And I think that mashup gave something different as well to the look. Eventually, I think Stéphane Fontaine, the DOP, brings a very French style to things. And the whole sort of thriller-esque, the American sort of thriller 70s vibe was quite interesting as well. So being based out of Cinecittà, we had our big build there, which took about 10, 12 weeks to build. The Sistine Chapel we sort of put back together. When you go to Cinecittà, they have a big backlot with elements of ancient Rome there. And they also had a flat-packed old set of the Sistine Chapel, which we pulled out, put back together again and slightly reconfigured to suit our more like a parliament, like a congress vibe, so that it looks like we have opposing cardinals. It looked more combative than perhaps it was, but it gave more of the thriller intenseness, I guess, of the story. And I guess it was a 8 or 10 week shoot. And I think it was about 5 weeks in the studio and 4 weeks out and about, or 3 weeks out and about, if I've done my maths right.
You just mentioned changing the shape of that room in order to make it more combative. And I read an example where like the redness of the robes was like minorly changed to an earlier non-modern robe because it was more aesthetically pleasing. And that's really interesting. And are there any more examples of pivots you made of that variety, or whether you didn't have the real information or it was just decided that it was better for the movie to go in this direction?
With any movie that's based on some sort of truth and factual, you do your due diligence and you research it, yeah? But we're making a cinematic story. It's not a documentary. So as much as we'd all researched what happens in the Conclave, that sort of then just inspires and informs the design and the look from both my production design and from costumes. So I know Lizzie had absolutely researched her side of things and found that actually the costumes weren't that great a red on camera and there weren't that great a fabric, you know. So she really fought hard to choose to change the colour red that we use in the fabric. And also, I mean, I think her work is absolutely magnificent because the men wear those suits, those robes so beautifully, and they walk differently and they behave differently and they all fit so wonderfully. So that was the starting point, was her colour red. From then on, I absolutely was like, okay, I'll rise to you. So we put that lovely red carpet down in the Sistine Chapel. Traditionally, they'd put a beige carpet, but no way was that going to be part of our world to have beige in our world. So we went red on red, which is an absolute homage to Cries and Whispers and other European movies. You know, suddenly it starts the intenseness. And then that red becomes a thread throughout the movie. And as much as actually the film has a very reduced colour palette, you've got the gold, red and white of the sort of outside, the opulent areas, and then you've got the blue, black and red of the hidden bunker-like areas. And we just played with those two elements. Again, the juxtaposition of the lightness and the darkness in the two areas, the sort of freedom and then being locked in. You know, I wanted it to feel like a posh prison. And again, we sucked out all the colour, all the air, apart from those red doors and the little bits of red dressing that we hid in the room or used on as fabric on the bed, or, you know, slightly changed some of the ornaments. There was very, very subtle elements of red. And that was also to let the costumes do all the talking, really. You know, the cardinals had to stay at the front of the whole story. The importance is on them the whole way through. So it's the more reduced I could be with the set design, the bigger they became within the space, I felt. And we played that all the way to the Room of Tears is another anomaly where in real life it's white. The Room of Tears is the room where they get robed just before they go and meet the public, basically. And it's known to be a whitewashed room with all the robes hanging on the bars and all the clothing ready to robe up the new Pope. And again, it just didn't feel right that we were going to finish in this sort of like pale white colour. It felt just not strong enough. So I think by painting it red, and I went a slightly different tone of red to everything else, it felt almost like a heart or a womb, like the beginning of something new. And it felt quite a supportive space for that pivotal discussion, you know, the final twist to happen, to go from that and then to when Rafe opens his window and looks out into the free world sort of thing. So that was another anomaly in that it wasn't it wasn't what would be in real life, but it absolutely worked for our storytelling.
You've spoken about being influenced by like Alan Pakula films, like The Parallax View. Were there other influences that you can speak on? And were there any that you were ever directly referencing within the movie?
Yeah.
Or was it all just osmosis, like the feeling of a 70s movie?
I think it's absolutely osmosis, been inspired by those type of movies, and also photography, and famous artwork. Caravaggio is all over the place in Rome, and you can't help but I think if he was alive today, he'd be making movies. The sort of light and dark in his paintings are amazing. So absolutely, we use that. There's very dark corners and pockets of light all the way through the movie. This, like Sol Leiter as an American photographer, the colors are very similar, and the sort of observational composition of the frames was really interesting, and just the graphicness of those sort of European movies, not just the thrillers, but the like the Stalker Tarkovsky is also obviously a favorite of many movie makers, but I don't think we were necessarily doing an homage to any of those films, but just we were inspired by their storytelling processes. Yeah.
So you talk about all these different locations in Rome that stood in for the Vatican, and were they real, like, religious spaces and real religious corridors?
Basically, I built there are two main builds, which is the Sistine Chapel, which we built, and then we also built the majority of the Casa Santa Marta, so the really long corridor and the bedrooms and suites that the cardinals lived in is all built on one stage. And then I augmented some real locations, and they were a mixture of, one is an old hospital that we took over, and that became the reception and lobby of the Casa Santa Marta. And then we built a lift there that basically when you go in the lift in northern Rome, and then we moved that lift to the soundstage at Cinecittà and put that at the end of the corridor that we built, and you come out in Cinecittà. So we did lots of tricks like that, but that was an old disused hospital. We filmed the canteen, was a military academy. It was their canteen that we did a number. So we loved it because it had such a lovely low ceiling. It felt really unusual to put the cardinals in this sort of municipal type modern canteen, but we dressed it all and brought in those. I think we had 120 red chairs, and slightly revamped it. I think they were very happy with how we left it. Some of the cloisters are some of the museums around Rome. The beautiful staircase is the Caserta, which is a big palace just outside of Naples, and then we did quite a bit in the EUR Centre, which is the business district of Rome, which is that lovely brutal fascist, more post-war architecture that Rome has and is influenced by. And that helped us with my design of the Casa Santa Marta, was absolutely inspired by more contemporary post-war architecture within Rome, and those terrazzine marble panels that we made in-house to create our little world of that. Yeah.
Talking about the Sistine Chapel, I read that clearing the art was difficult, and I didn't realize that it wasn't owned by the Vatican. Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, there's a weird setup. That's why you can't take photographs when you're in the Sistine Chapel. And you might have to check the rights to it, but I believe that the images are owned, it's either by Kodak or Fuji. I think they took, yeah, exactly. But I might have that wrong, so you should probably just check. But it's something like some Japanese company has taken high resolution images of it, because actually, obviously, you can see this artwork on the internet, sort of thing, but you can't take your own photos randomly. So I think we had to pay for the rights to use the images. Yeah.
So the film sort of once it settles into the sequestration, the film revolves around a few central locations, and maybe different than other movies you've worked on. It's sort of set up shop in a few different locations. And did that cause you to think about your design in a different way?
It absolutely does. And interesting, the end product is, you go through so many reasons. Why did we build it like this? And the reasons often are financial, time and space. So when we're locked into the Casa Santa Marta, I had quite a small space on the side of the set build of the Sistine Chapel. We had one big soundstage at Cinecittà, And we built the Sistine Chapel just to one side, just in case we needed to build, because for a while we were trying to find the Casa Santa Marta and the corridors and rooms on location, but it wasn't happening how we wanted it to. And Edward and I sort of held fast because we knew actually building it was going to be the way forward. And eventually we worked out a way to build it. And I wanted the longest corridor possible. Well, the Sistine Chapel is pretty long, so I built the corridor right next to the Sistine Chapel on the soundstage. And then I was left with a little corner where I built all the rooms, and all the rooms, it's basically one room that I reconfigure. I built the walls so they're on wheels, so we can squeeze them in and out depending on which cardinal's room we're in that day. So they all feel slightly different. But of course, quite often when you go and stay in a hotel room, that all the rooms are very similar. So it was an interesting challenge to work out how do we make each of these cardinals' rooms feel a little different, because it's not their character. Having lived there for months and months, there's nothing that they could bring. So it was really interesting to try and work out a little bit of a backstory to how possibly their rooms could be. Things like John Lithgow's character Tedesco, we think his staff had phoned ahead and probably paid someone off to give him a suite, one of the better rooms with all the modern accoutrements, a good coffee machine and what have you. And he has a separate office and a separate bedroom. Whereas Rafe's character doesn't really care. He just wants everyone to get in, vote and get out again. So he's probably got one of the worst rooms with no separate office, and a sort of dodgy minibar. And maybe the air conditioning is broken in his room, that sort of vibe. And also we made his room a lot smaller, so we pushed the sets in, but it's all the same. And the other interesting note was, when they're sequestered, the blinds are all down, so there's no natural light. So it was a big challenge for the DOP to light all of those elements, even in the Sistine Chapel. How do we light it with no daylight? How do we light it with nothing coming in the doors? It's going to feel very samey all the way through. So a couple of things is using practical lights. And I had a great set decorator who just nailed it with all the practical lights. And then Stefan also, between myself and him, we built these shutters that when they came down over the windows of the casa, we put little holes in them so that he could blast light through. And actually, it created a gobo-like effect that looked like prison bars. That was a happy accident that we played on. So again, you get that slightly subconscious feel that these cardinals are locked in, are in this posh prison, having the intense isolation of making these decisions that so many people count on. Yeah.
Talking about having to create the builds and making that work within the budget, were there any other instances where the realities of production, whether because of time or money, forced you into a difficult situation where you had to change your plan or do something different, and where you think it ultimately maybe even benefited the movie? Yeah,
probably there's quite a bit of that going on, because you have to stand your ground of what you can give in and what you can't. And I guess the canteen's quite an interesting one, because that took a while to find, and it was in an absolute state, and we needed to do a number on it. And that I wasn't sure how that was going to work out, but I'm really happy with that. But that all comes down to a real fantastic collaboration with all the other HODs, because once you put that amount of men in red robes in a room, it's always going to look powerful, So, and it's the same with all those amazing images that Edward kept in the film, like the brollies, not just the white umbrellas, but the black umbrellas at the beginning, I think is just as powerful. And it's those beats, those little decisions that I think often idiosyncrasies that make this movie.
Whoa! What an interview, Trent, right? Yeah, thank you so much to Suzie Davies and her team for making this interview happen. Next week, you can listen to the remaining half, where I'm realizing now, because of the way we've unfortunately scheduled this, we talk about how she's excited to go to the Oscars, and that will already have happened. But No worries. It's still interesting. And there's still some cool stuff about the making of Conclave next week. And you can check out that episode wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, etc. Wherever you get your podcast, truly, we are there. And we are also on Instagram and Twitter. If you want any updates on upcoming episodes, you can go check us out on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, I guess come back next week for part 2.